Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the sound of ancient drums echoing across a distant valley, banners fluttering in the wind, and the quiet footsteps of soldiers moving through the dust of forgotten roads. This is the world of the art of war, a book of strategy written more than 2,000 years ago, yet still whispering wisdom to us today. Before we begin, I'd love for you to support the channel. Please tap like, subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a message in the comments letting us know where in the world you are listening from. It's always wonderful to see how far these stories travel. Now, take a deep breath, let yourself get comfortable, sit back, relax, and allow the journey to unfold. The story begins. Part 1. The Man Behind the Wisdom. The story of the art of war begins not with a book, but with a world in turmoil. To understand Sun Tzu's wisdom, we must first step back into the land and time that shaped him. China, more than 2,000 years ago, was not a unified country. Instead, it was a patchwork of competing states, each hungry for power, each ruled by ambitious kings who sought dominance over their neighbors. This was the era historians call the Spring and Autumn period, which then gave way to the Warring States period. It was a time when survival meant strategy. War was not occasional, it was constant. Alliances rose and fell, and kingdoms were swallowed whole when they failed to prepare. Into this dangerous and uncertain world came Sun Tzu. We know little about him as a man, for his life is wrapped in legend. Even his name has been debated by historians. Some believe Sun Tzu, or Xuanzi, may have been a general who served the state of Wu around the 5th century BCE. Others argue he may be a symbolic figure, a collective voice of military strategists whose teachings were gathered together under one name. Whether Sun Tzu was one man or many, his words carried a weight so great that they survived centuries of war, dynastic change, and political upheaval. What we do know is that the art of war emerged in a time when rulers needed guidance not only on how to fight, but how to win with the least cost. Battles were expensive. Armies drained treasuries. Every soldier who marched to war required food, armor, and weapons. Victory brought glory, but careless victories could also bring ruin. Sun Tzu's gift was to show that war was not merely about fighting harder or throwing more men into battle. It was about thinking differently. It was about wisdom before weapons, and calculation before conflict. Imagine the landscape of ancient China, fertile river valleys cut by mountains, with great cities rising from the plains. Walls stretched across horizons, and armies marched in formations that seemed endless. The states of Qi, Chu, Yang, Han, Zhao, Wei, and Qin competed for dominance. Each was led by kings who dreamed of unifying all under heaven. But unity was far away, and the path to it would be paved with countless battles. In this world, generals were both respected and feared. A wise commander could decide the fate of kingdoms. A reckless one could lose it all in a single afternoon. This was the world in which Sun Tzu offered his teachings, a world where a clever plan could save lives and reshape history. Sun Tzu's philosophy was not about brute force. Instead, he looked to nature, to patterns, to the subtle rhythms of conflict. He observed that rivers carved valleys not by force, but by persistence. He saw that the greatest victories often came not from battlefields, but from minds. His principles were as much about psychology and human behavior as they were about swords and shields. Legends tell us that Sun Tzu presented his work to King Helu of Wu. To prove his principles, he was asked to demonstrate his ability to command. The king provided him with a group of palace concubines, hardly warriors by training or inclination. Sun Tzu divided them into companies and appointed the king's favorites as leaders. When they laughed at his orders, Sun Tzu reminded them that responsibility lay not only with soldiers, but with commanders who failed to instruct clearly. After a second failure, he executed the king's favorites to prove his seriousness, and then continued the drill until the women followed his orders perfectly. This story, while debated by historians, shows us the image of Sun Tzu that endured, a man of discipline, precision, and an almost ruthless clarity of purpose. To him, war was not chaos. It was something that could be studied, structured, and mastered. Whether or not this episode truly happened matters less than the lesson it conveys. Sun Tzu's strategies were not meant only for soldiers. They were lessons in leadership, responsibility, and the consequences of clarity or confusion. His teaching began with the principle that war is of vital importance to the state. It was a matter of life and death, of survival or ruin. Therefore, it demanded the utmost attention. One reason Sun Tzu's work has endured is its simplicity. Unlike long philosophical texts or complicated military manuals, the art of war is concise. In only 13 chapters, Sun Tzu condensed wisdom into sharp, memorable phrases. All warfare is based on deception. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. These are statements so clear that they transcend time and culture. But behind this clarity lies depth. Each statement invites reflection. What does it mean to deceive in war? What does it mean to know yourself? How do we measure victory? Is it the destruction of an enemy, or the preservation of strength? Sun Tzu did not write to glorify war. He wrote to minimize its cost. He taught that the best general is the one who wins without fighting, who bends his opponent through preparation, diplomacy, or psychology before blades are ever drawn. This is why his lessons remain relevant today. Most of us will never lead armies, but all of us face conflict. It may be in business, in negotiations, in relationships, or in personal challenges. Sun Tzu's ideas remind us that brute force is rarely the best solution. Patience, awareness, and planning win more often than anger or haste. To understand the art of war, we must also recognize that it is not merely a military manual. It is a book of strategy, and strategy is something universal. When Sun Tzu says, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting," he is teaching more than how to win wars. He is teaching how to resolve conflicts with the least damage. In modern terms, this could mean a business negotiation where both sides walk away satisfied, or a personal disagreement resolved through calm rather than escalation. When he writes, "In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity," he reminds us that crisis is not always disaster. It can also be a turning point. During times of uncertainty, those who remain calm, observant, and prepared often rise while others fall. This principle has been proven again and again in history, from leaders who turned defeats into triumphs, to entrepreneurs who built empires in times of economic downturn. Even his warning that if you know neither yourself nor your enemy, you will succumb in every battle carries a lesson for modern life. Self-awareness is essential. So is understanding those you must face, whether they are competitors, rivals, or simply challenges. To rush forward without reflection is to invite failure. It is easy to imagine that wisdom from 2.5 millennia ago would be outdated. Yet, the genius of the art of war is how timeless it feels. Its lessons are not tied to swords or chariots, but to the unchanging nature of human behavior. Fear, ambition, pride, and uncertainty shaped battlefields in Sun Tzu's time, and they shape decisions today. This is why generals in World War II studied Sun Tzu. It is why business leaders quote him in boardrooms, why sports coaches draw inspiration from him, and why his words still sell millions of copies each year. His wisdom was never about a single battlefield. It was about the battlefield of the human mind. In the chapters that follow, we will walk step by step through the art of war. Each part of this series will take one of Sun Tzu's principles, explain its original meaning, and explore how it can guide us today. We will not treat this book as an ancient curiosity, but as a living guide to strategy, preparation, and clarity. The next part will begin with laying plans, the foundation of all strategy. Before a single move is made, before armies march or negotiations begin, Sun Tzu insists on careful calculation. He reminds us that success does not come from luck, but from preparation. As we explore this principle, we will see how it applies not only to battlefields, but to careers, relationships, and the pursuit of personal goals. For now, let us leave this opening chapter with one clear truth. Sun Tzu's greatest victory was not on a battlefield. It was the survival of his wisdom across centuries, cultures, and contexts. His words remind us that the most powerful weapon we possess is not the sword or the spear, but the mind that directs them. Part 2. Laying plans. Before any battle is fought, before the first soldier marches or the first arrow flies, Sun Tzu insists on something simple but profound: planning. To him, victory is not born on the battlefield. It is born in the quiet rooms where strategies are shaped, calculations are weighed, and possibilities are measured. This is why he begins his work not with the clash of armies, but with the careful art of laying plans. Sun Tzu tells us that war is a matter of vital importance to the state. It concerns the life or death of nations, the survival or ruin of peoples. Therefore, it cannot be entered into lightly. Every choice must be measured, every step thought through. In his opening chapter, he presents 5 constant factors that govern success or failure: the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, and method and discipline. Each of these speaks not only to war in his time, but to strategy in any field today. The moral law, in Sun Tzu's view, refers to harmony between rulers and the people. When leaders earn loyalty, when they inspire trust, soldiers will follow them without hesitation, even into danger. In a broader sense, this is the principle of alignment. An army that doubts its leaders will falter. A business with workers who mistrust management will crumble. A family without unity will fracture under stress. Sun Tzu begins with this truth: before you lead others into struggle, you must first win their hearts. Heaven, in his words, represents forces of nature, the rhythms of day and night, cold and heat, seasons and weather. In ancient battles, these conditions could decide outcomes. Marching an army under the blazing summer sun or during the floods of autumn could doom even the strongest force. Today, heaven can be understood as timing and circumstance. In business, it might mean market conditions. In personal life, it might mean choosing the right moment to act or to wait. Sun Tzu reminds us that strategy is not only about what we do, but when we do it. Earth is the lay of the land, the distances, the dangers, the obstacles. Armies that ignore geography invite defeat. An army forced to cross rivers while its enemy holds high ground is already at a disadvantage. In modern life, Earth is context, the realities of the environment around us. A brilliant idea launched in the wrong place can fail, while a simple idea introduced in fertile ground can flourish. Awareness of one's terrain, whether physical or metaphorical, is essential to wise planning. The commander is the leader, whose qualities Sun Tzu describes as wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness. These are not the qualities of a tyrant, but of a leader who inspires and directs with clarity. Without wisdom, a commander blunders. Without sincerity, he loses trust. Without benevolence, he breeds resentment. Without courage, he hesitates. Without discipline, he invites chaos. The lesson is universal. Leadership is not only about authority, but about character. Whether leading armies, businesses, or families, it is the integrity of the leader that shapes the destiny of the group. The final factor is method and discipline, the structure that holds an army together. This means organization, control, and clear systems. In Sun Tzu's time, it referred to the proper arrangement of troops, the care of supplies, and the clarity of commands. In modern terms, it is logistics, management, and execution. A great vision without discipline collapses. A brilliant plan without structure dissolves into confusion. Sun Tzu insists that true strength is not found in numbers alone, but in order and unity. These 5 factors, harmony, timing, context, leadership, and discipline, form the foundation upon which all plans rest. Sun Tzu emphasizes that they must be studied with utmost seriousness, compared carefully against those of the enemy, and used to predict the chances of success. To him, this was not guesswork but calculation. By weighing these factors, a general could foresee the outcome before battle was joined. Planning, in Sun Tzu's vision, is not about predicting the future with certainty, but about preparing so well that the outcome becomes more likely to lean in your favor. He reminds us that strategy is a balance of knowledge and flexibility. To prepare too little is to stumble blindly. To cling too rigidly to plans is to break when conditions change. The art lies in studying deeply, but remaining adaptable. This idea carries immense power in our own time. In business, laying plans means conducting research, analyzing markets, and preparing budgets. In personal life, it might mean weighing options before making a career change or a major decision. The principle is the same. Do not charge forward without thought. Take the time to understand the forces at play, the environment around you, and the character of those who lead and follow. Yet Sun Tzu also warns us that no plan survives unchanged once action begins. The purpose of planning is not to dictate every step, but to prepare the mind for change. The general who has considered many possibilities will not be surprised when one of them comes to pass. The leader who has reflected on challenges will adapt when they appear. Planning, therefore, is less about fixing the future than about strengthening the ability to meet it. Think of the difference between 2 leaders about to embark on a project. One rushes ahead, confident in improvisation, believing that details will sort themselves out. The other pauses, studies the environment, weighs resources, considers timing, and builds a team prepared for obstacles. When the unexpected arises, as it always does, the first is shaken, while the second adapts. This is Sun Tzu's wisdom in action. He also stresses the role of deception in planning. All warfare is based on deception, he writes. To mislead the enemy, to appear weak when strong, to appear distant when near, these tactics preserve strength and sow confusion. In modern life, this may sound harsh, but it translates into a reminder that appearances matter. A negotiator may withhold eagerness to gain leverage. A business may launch quietly to avoid tipping off competitors. In daily life, it can mean holding back anger or surprise until the right moment to reveal it. The lesson is not cruelty, but awareness. How things seem often shapes how others act. Sun Tzu's insistence on calculation also warns against overconfidence. Victory, he says, belongs to the side that has planned more thoroughly. The side that neglects preparation courts disaster. History confirms this truth. Armies with overwhelming numbers have been destroyed by smaller, better prepared foes. Nations that underestimated their enemies have collapsed. On a smaller scale, individuals who leap into ventures without reflection often stumble, while those who prepare carefully succeed. What makes his teaching enduring is how plainly it applies to human struggles beyond war. Before starting a business, study the market. Before speaking in anger, pause to reflect. Before pursuing a goal, weigh the cost as well as the reward. Planning is not hesitation. It is strength. It is the quiet work that makes success possible. The calmness of Sun Tzu's words hides their urgency. He does not paint war as glorious, but as deadly serious. To him, planning was not optional. It was survival. He reminds us that the greatest victories are won before conflict even begins, by leaders who thought carefully, weighed wisely, and moved with clarity. As we pause here at the close of this chapter, let us reflect on how planning shapes our own lives. Each day brings decisions, some small, some large. Each choice carries consequences. To live without planning is to drift, carried by chance. To plan with wisdom is to steer, guided by foresight. Sun Tzu invites us to treat our choices with the seriousness of generals, not because every decision is a battle, but because every decision shapes the course of our lives. The journey through the art of war continues with the next teaching, the cost of waging war. If planning is about preparation, the next step is about recognizing the true price of conflict, the toll it takes, and the wisdom of restraint. Sun Tzu warns that even victories can ruin those who win them if they do not understand cost. His words will lead us into deeper reflection, not only on war, but on the choices we make when we spend our energy, our resources, and our time. For now, it is enough to carry this truth. Every victory begins long before the first step is taken, in the quiet discipline of laying plans. Part 3. Waging War. When Sun Tzu turns from planning to the subject of waging war, his tone grows heavier. If laying plans was about calculation and foresight, this chapter is about cost. He does not speak of glory or conquest. He speaks of burden. He reminds us that war is not only measured in victories or losses, but in the quiet devastation that lingers after armies have marched. He insists that even those who win can destroy themselves if they do not understand the price of what they have undertaken. To Sun Tzu, the great danger was not defeat, but exhaustion. Armies consume everything around them. Each soldier requires food, clothing, weapons, and care. Horses need fodder, carts need wheels, armor must be repaired, and weapons must be replaced. A long campaign drains treasuries and erodes morale. Farmers pulled from their fields leave harvests untended, and soon the people at home suffer as much as the soldiers at the front. War, in his eyes, was not an endless contest of strength. It was a question of endurance. Whoever could sustain the costs longer, and manage them more wisely, would prevail. This is why Sun Tzu advises against prolonged campaigns. He warns that when war drags on, resources dwindle, morale collapses, and even the victor emerges broken. The general who delights in long wars misunderstands the true art of strategy. Real skill lies in winning swiftly, decisively, and with as little loss as possible. The supreme commander, in his view, is not the one who fights the most battles, but the one who brings them to the shortest end. It is striking how practical this advice feels even outside the battlefield. In our lives today, there are conflicts that consume energy the way armies consume supplies. Long, drawn-out disputes drain not only time but spirit. Arguments that stretch for months wear down relationships. Business ventures that lack clear endings devour resources until companies collapse. Even personal ambitions can turn into prolonged wars against ourselves, leaving us exhausted rather than fulfilled. Sun Tzu reminds us to seek clarity and efficiency. It is better to resolve swiftly, with wisdom, than to be dragged endlessly into struggles that sap our strength. His perspective also reminds us to count the cost before entering any struggle. It is easy to imagine victory as pure reward, but Sun Tzu insists that victory itself can be ruin if the cost outweighs the gain. An army that wins but empties its granaries has planted the seed of its own destruction. A business that dominates its market but drives itself into debt is no true victor. A person who achieves success at the cost of health or peace of mind has not won, but only exchanged one loss for another. The careful reader will notice how consistent this is with Sun Tzu's earlier principle of laying plans. Just as he asked us to measure conditions before acting, here he asks us to measure consequences. He is teaching not only about strategy, but about perspective. The wise leader does not look only at the battlefield. He looks beyond it, to the weeks, months, and years that follow. What will be left standing after the victory? What will be broken beyond repair? These are the questions that shape whether a triumph is truly worth pursuing. History offers many reminders of what happens when leaders ignore this advice. Armies that marched deep into foreign lands, confident in their might, often found themselves stranded without supplies, harried by hunger more than by enemies. Empires that sought endless expansion eventually collapsed under their own weight. The lesson is not confined to kings and generals. Anyone who spends recklessly, who pushes beyond their means, who fights every battle without thought of rest, eventually discovers the cost of overextension. Sun Tzu offers a way forward. He recommends feeding armies with the resources of the enemy when possible, capturing supplies rather than transporting them over long distances. This is not only a matter of efficiency but of strategy. To use what belongs to the opponent is to weaken them while strengthening oneself. The deeper principle here is adaptability. Instead of exhausting your own reserves, find ways to turn the environment to your advantage. In modern terms, this might mean learning to work with what is already available rather than chasing endlessly after more. It might mean turning competitors' strengths into opportunities for yourself, or rethinking challenges as sources of hidden value. At the heart of this teaching lies a humility about human limits. Sun Tzu recognizes that no army, no leader, and no nation is inexhaustible. He invites us to accept that strength is always finite, and that true wisdom lies in preserving it. A commander who hurls everything into battle for the sake of a single triumph may achieve glory, but he leaves himself vulnerable afterward. A leader who measures each step, conserving energy and spending resources wisely, ensures that he can continue long after others falter. This understanding applies to the conflicts within our own lives. Every decision we make, every challenge we take on, demands something from us: time, energy, money, or attention. If we commit too much to one battle, we may win it but lose the capacity to fight the next. Sun Tzu's reminder is simple but profound. Do not spend recklessly. Guard your strength. Choose your battles wisely. Seek victories that strengthen you rather than victories that leave you hollow. His words also touch on the importance of morale. He knew that soldiers are not machines. They are human beings who tire, hunger, and despair. A prolonged war wears down even the bravest. In the same way, prolonged conflicts in our personal or professional lives wear down our spirit. A workplace locked in endless competition breeds cynicism. A family caught in unending arguments grows weary. Even within ourselves, constant struggle without rest breeds fatigue. Sun Tzu's wisdom invites us to respect the human need for balance, to pursue resolution rather than endless contention. It is not surprising that many modern thinkers have found in this chapter lessons for business, politics, and daily life. Companies that expand too quickly without resources to sustain growth collapse under debt. Nations that fight wars without understanding their true costs discover that victory can be more destructive than defeat. Individuals who chase success without pause find themselves burned out, their achievements empty. The art of war, as Sun Tzu presents it, is as much about restraint as it is about action. What strikes the reader most is how Sun Tzu does not romanticize conflict. Where many writings of his time glorified battle, he speaks with a sober voice. To him, war is not a chance for honor but a danger to be managed with utmost care. His advice is not to seek out as many battles as possible, but to end them as quickly and efficiently as one can. The highest skill is not in prolonging war but in avoiding unnecessary suffering. As we sit with his words, the lesson becomes clear for our own time. We must all wage wars of one kind or another, struggles for survival, for growth, for justice, or for our own dreams. But Sun Tzu asks us to count the cost of these struggles. He asks us to ask ourselves, will the price I pay be greater than the reward I gain? Is there a swifter, wiser path? Can I resolve this with less harm, less waste, less exhaustion? These questions, if asked honestly, can save us from countless mistakes. At the close of this chapter, we carry forward Sun Tzu's reminder that conflict is costly. To win wisely is to win swiftly, to win with economy, and to preserve strength for the future. The art of waging war is not the art of endless struggle, but the art of knowing when to act, when to wait, and when to bring things to an end. The journey continues in the next chapter, where Sun Tzu leads us to the subject of stratagem, the skill of defeating enemies not through strength alone, but through the subtle art of winning without fighting. It is here that his philosophy shines most clearly, reminding us that the greatest victories are those achieved through wisdom rather than force. Part 4. Attack by Stratagem. If planning teaches us how to prepare, and the cost of war reminds us to act with restraint, then Sun Tzu's next teaching reveals the highest form of mastery. He tells us that the supreme art of war is not to fight at all. The greatest victory is not won through bloodshed or exhaustion, but through stratagem, through the ability to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast without needing to destroy. It is in this principle that Sun Tzu's genius shines most clearly, for here he shows us that the sharpest weapon is the mind. To Sun Tzu, every conflict contains levels of victory. The lowest victory is to destroy an enemy's armies in battle. Higher than that is to break his alliances, leaving him isolated. Higher still is to capture his cities and land without destruction. But the highest victory of all is to subdue him without a single fight, to make his resistance collapse before the clash even begins. The goal of the strategist is not to defeat, but to prevent the need for battle in the first place. This idea may seem paradoxical. How can one win without fighting? Yet history and daily life prove it again and again. An army may surrender when it realizes the hopelessness of its position. A negotiation may conclude in your favor when the other side understands that resistance will only bring loss. A rival may retreat when they sense your preparation is too strong. In all these cases, the victory comes not from the clash of force, but from the quiet pressure of perception, patience, and positioning. Sun Tzu reminds us that battles, even when won, are costly. Soldiers are lost, resources are spent, and strength is diminished. To fight is always to pay a price. Therefore, the wise general avoids battle unless it is necessary. He seeks to undermine the enemy's will to fight rather than his ability to fight. He spreads confusion, cuts off supplies, weakens alliances, and creates doubt. By the time his enemy realizes his position, the struggle has already been lost. This way of thinking requires patience and subtlety. It is easier to charge headlong into conflict, to seek immediate resolution through force. It is much harder to hold back, to wait for the right moment, to maneuver silently until the other side has already given up the ground. Yet this is where true mastery lies. The general who fights every battle wins some and loses some. The general who wins without battle cannot be defeated. The lesson speaks beyond the battlefield. In daily life, how many conflicts do we enter out of pride, impatience, or anger? How often do we fight simply because we feel we must prove ourselves, only to discover later that the cost was greater than the reward? Sun Tzu whispers to us that restraint is strength. The greatest victories in our lives may be those where no argument was spoken, no confrontation escalated, no bridge was burned. To walk away, to redirect, to resolve quietly, these are not signs of weakness but of wisdom. In the realm of business, this principle is clear. Companies that destroy competitors through price wars may find themselves weakened in the process. Far wiser is the company that positions itself so effectively that competitors cannot challenge it at all. In negotiation, the sharpest minds aim not for crushing the other side but for creating agreements where resistance fades because cooperation offers more. The best leaders know that loyalty gained freely is more valuable than obedience forced. Even in our personal relationships, the art of winning without fighting can transform how we live. Arguments within families or friendships often escalate not because of necessity, but because of pride. If one person insists on victory, the cost may be the relationship itself. Sun Tzu would remind us that sometimes the better victory is to step aside, to listen, to resolve with gentleness rather than force. Peace gained without quarrel is stronger than peace demanded after shouting. Another lesson in this chapter lies in the importance of adaptability. To win without fighting requires more than patience. It requires the ability to use every advantage, to see openings invisible to others, to know when to advance and when to wait. Sun Tzu compares strategy to water. It flows into the lowest places, fills the gaps, and adapts to the shape of the land. In the same way, the wise strategist bends to circumstance, shaping his response to each unique situation. There is no single formula. The art is in flexibility. This adaptability also means understanding people. To bend an enemy without battle requires knowing his fears, his ambitions, his weaknesses. Sun Tzu urges us to study not only terrain and resources, but the human heart. A general who knows the enemy's pride can use it against him. A negotiator who knows the other side's needs can craft offers too tempting to refuse. A friend who understands another's pain can resolve conflict through compassion rather than force. All of these are forms of victory achieved without direct struggle. It is also here that Sun Tzu emphasizes deception. To appear strong where you are weak, to appear far when you are near, to appear ready when you are uncertain. These illusions unsettle opponents, making them hesitant and fearful. Deception, in his teaching, is not cruelty but clarity. It means shaping the perception of others so that they make the decisions you desire. In modern terms, this might be the quiet management of impressions, the careful control of what others see and expect. When we reflect on this teaching, its relevance grows wider. Consider the crises of our world today. Nations often rush into conflicts that drag on for years, draining lives and treasure. Companies burn themselves out competing to destroy one another. Individuals wear themselves thin in endless struggles for pride. Sun Tzu's voice rises from the past with a reminder that true strength is not in constant battle, but in creating conditions where battles are unnecessary. This lesson does not invite us to avoid struggle altogether. Life brings conflict whether we seek it or not. But it does invite us to consider carefully whether a fight must be fought, and whether it can be won before it begins. It invites us to see victory not as the defeat of others, but as the preservation of strength, the avoidance of waste, the quiet resolution that leaves both sides less harmed. As we sit with this teaching, it is worth reflecting on the battles we face in our own lives. How many of them could be won not by confrontation, but by foresight? How many could be resolved not by anger, but by understanding? How often might patience spare us pain that force would only prolong? Sun Tzu's wisdom is not merely for generals. It is for anyone who seeks to live with clarity in a world of conflict. As this chapter closes, the message is clear: victory without fighting is the highest form of victory. To outthink is greater than to outfight. To resolve is greater than to destroy. To preserve is greater than to consume. This principle, carried from ancient battlefields into our modern lives, reminds us that the sharpest sword is often the one that remains sheathed. The journey now leads us to Sun Tzu's next teaching, where he turns to the art of positioning and preparation. If winning without fighting is the supreme goal, then understanding how to place oneself, how to build strength while avoiding weakness, becomes the next step. In the following chapter, we will walk with him into the world of tactical dispositions, where victory is shaped not in the clash of forces but in the careful arrangement of strength. Part 5. Tactical Dispositions. In the earlier chapters, Sun Tzu taught us to prepare carefully, to count the cost of every conflict, and to seek victory without fighting whenever possible. With these foundations laid, he now turns to a more precise teaching, the art of positioning. He reminds us that much of victory is decided not in the moment of battle, but long before, in how one arranges and protects their strength. Tactical disposition, as he describes it, is the discipline of shaping conditions so that defeat is impossible while leaving open the possibility of victory. Sun Tzu writes that the skillful warrior first makes himself invincible, and then waits for the enemy to become vulnerable. This principle may sound simple, yet it carries great depth. To make oneself invincible is not to guarantee triumph in every encounter, but to remove opportunities for others to strike effectively. It means preparing defenses so strong that opponents waste themselves in futile effort. Victory then comes not from reckless attack, but from patience, from the discipline of waiting until the right moment appears. He teaches that one cannot command victory directly, for victory depends also on the enemy's mistakes, weaknesses, and miscalculations. What can be commanded, however, is invulnerability. We can ensure that our side is secure, that our forces are ready, and that we do not expose ourselves to unnecessary risk. Once this stability is achieved, victory becomes far more likely, because the enemy, unlike ourselves, will eventually reveal gaps that can be exploited. This way of thinking requires humility. Many leaders believe that success comes from constant aggression, from pushing forward no matter what. Sun Tzu instead urges restraint. He tells us that rushing into battle does not prove strength but often reveals insecurity. True strength lies in patience, in the discipline to hold back until conditions favor action. The commander who forces a fight when the ground is poor, the timing unwise, or the troops unprepared, is not bold but foolish. The wise commander shapes circumstances so that the fight, when it comes, is already tilted in his favor. In daily life, the principle of tactical dispositions is just as relevant. To make oneself invincible might mean building skills so strong that opportunities naturally come, while risks slide away. It might mean creating savings that protect against unexpected hardship. It might mean cultivating patience and calm so that anger cannot draw us into unwise decisions. Just as an army secures its defenses before advancing, a person must secure their foundation before reaching for greater goals. Sun Tzu also warns against underestimating the enemy. He tells us that a general who assumes victory before it is earned invites disaster. To underestimate an opponent is to leave oneself unguarded, to expose weaknesses in the belief that they will never be challenged. Instead, he calls for constant vigilance. Even when confident, the wise leader assumes nothing and prepares for everything. In this way, he never leaves an opening for surprise. The teaching also emphasizes the importance of clarity. Sun Tzu describes how the wise general does not show his form to the enemy, does not reveal his plans, does not expose his intentions. He conceals his strengths, disguises his weaknesses, and moves only when the path is clear. In modern terms, this is the art of discretion. To reveal too much is to give away power. To act with secrecy, to prepare quietly, and to strike only when ready, ensures that one holds the advantage. In a business setting, this might mean developing ideas in silence until they are ready to launch, rather than announcing them prematurely. In personal life, it might mean holding plans close until the right moment to share them. In both cases, it reflects the same principle: protection of one's position while waiting for openings. Another key element of this chapter is balance. Sun Tzu explains that defense and offense must complement each other. Defense alone ensures survival but not victory. Offense alone risks collapse if the enemy is stronger. The wise strategist builds a position that cannot be harmed, and then waits patiently for the right chance to move forward. When that chance appears, he strikes with precision, conserving energy by acting only when success is likely. This balance between patience and action, between protection and opportunity, is at the heart of his philosophy. Consider how this principle applies to the struggles we face every day. A student preparing for an exam makes himself invincible not by waiting until the last moment to study, but by building knowledge steadily so that when the test arrives, the answers come easily. An athlete secures invincibility through training, so that when the competition begins, the body responds without hesitation. A worker protects themselves from sudden change by saving money, learning skills, and building networks before crisis strikes. In each case, the disposition is set long before the challenge arrives. Sun Tzu also speaks of shaping the enemy. By remaining secure and revealing nothing, one forces the opponent into uncertainty. The enemy wastes energy searching for weaknesses that do not exist. Frustration grows. Mistakes multiply. At last, in their impatience, they expose themselves. The wise general does not rush to create opportunities. He waits for the enemy to create them. When they do, he is ready. There is deep wisdom here about human behavior. How often do we lose patience and rush into action, only to discover that our haste has created openings for others to exploit? How often do we exhaust ourselves in fruitless attacks against those who are well prepared, when we might have waited for a better chance? Sun Tzu invites us to recognize that timing, patience, and positioning are as powerful as strength. By learning when to hold and when to strike, we turn the flow of conflict in our favor. This teaching also echoes the earlier lesson on deception. By appearing inactive, we may conceal strength. By appearing vulnerable, we may lure opponents into traps. But beneath these appearances lies the same discipline: to prepare carefully, to secure oneself fully, and to reveal nothing until the moment is right. In this way, the strategist controls not only his own position but the perceptions and actions of others. As we reflect on this chapter, the pattern becomes clear. Sun Tzu is not teaching recklessness but discipline, not aggression but control. Tactical disposition is the art of creating invulnerability, of standing so firm that nothing can shake you, and then moving forward only when the chance for victory is undeniable. It is a teaching of patience in a world that often glorifies haste, of quiet preparation in a world that celebrates noise. In our lives today, these lessons are invaluable. When we face uncertainty, we can focus first on strengthening our position. When tempted to act rashly, we can remind ourselves that restraint often protects us better than boldness. When opponents or rivals press forward recklessly, we can wait for the cracks to appear, then act with clarity. This is how the art of war becomes the art of living. At the close of this chapter, we are left with a reminder. Victory is not a matter of constant fighting, but of careful positioning. The one who makes himself secure cannot be defeated. The one who waits patiently for the right moment cannot be denied. Sun Tzu's voice echoes across centuries to tell us that wisdom lies not in endless struggle but in shaping conditions so that struggle itself becomes unnecessary. The path ahead will take us deeper into the heart of his philosophy. From the discipline of dispositions, Sun Tzu moves next to the subject of energy, how to harness momentum, how to direct force efficiently, and how to turn even small efforts into great results. Just as water flows and wind moves, so too must the strategist learn to guide strength with precision. In the next part of this journey, we will explore how Sun Tzu transforms raw force into controlled power. Part 6. Energy. In the earlier teachings, Sun Tzu guided us through the necessity of planning, the recognition of cost, the supremacy of winning without fighting, and the discipline of positioning. Each of these lessons has prepared the way for the theme he now brings forward, energy. By this, he does not mean mere strength or brute force, but the proper use of resources, momentum, and effort. He teaches that what matters is not only how much power one possesses, but how wisely it is directed. Sun Tzu compares energy to the forces of nature. A river, when dammed, stores its strength quietly. When the dam is opened, the waters rush forth with irresistible force. Wind, when guided through a narrow pass, grows fierce, concentrated, and devastating. In the same way, human energy, whether that of an army, a business, or an individual, must be conserved, organized, and released at the right moment. To scatter strength in all directions is to waste it. To focus it precisely is to make it overwhelming. He distinguishes between two kinds of energy, the ordinary and the extraordinary. Ordinary energy is the steady, consistent effort of daily life, the foundation upon which all action rests. Extraordinary energy is the sudden strike, the concentrated effort that appears at the decisive moment. The wise strategist uses ordinary energy to sustain, and extraordinary energy to break through. Just as a craftsman uses steady strokes to shape a piece of wood and then a sharp blow to split it, so too does a general use patience and sudden force in harmony. This teaching reveals the rhythm of conflict. An army cannot charge endlessly. Soldiers must march, rest, and march again. The same applies to every form of struggle in our lives. No one can live in constant crisis, constant effort, or constant pressure. Energy must be managed, preserved, and renewed. Sun Tzu reminds us that even the strongest force becomes weak when it is exhausted, while even a small force becomes powerful when it is focused at the right place and time. In practice, this means that the wise leader directs energy where it matters most. He does not waste his army's strength on minor skirmishes when the decisive battle lies ahead. He does not exhaust his soldiers with endless marching when rest will prepare them for greater victory. He understands that efficiency is not about doing more, but about doing what matters. This principle holds true in our own world. In business, energy is time, capital, and attention. Companies that chase every opportunity spread themselves too thin, while those that focus on key markets often succeed with less effort. In personal life, energy is attention and willpower. Those who waste themselves on constant distractions find little left for what truly matters, while those who focus carefully on chosen goals achieve more with less. Sun Tzu's wisdom invites us to ask, where am I spending my energy, and is it truly moving me toward victory? Another lesson in this chapter is the importance of momentum. A small push at the right moment can create great movement. A cart balanced on a slope requires only a touch to begin rolling. A flame, once lit in the right place, can spread quickly. Sun Tzu teaches that energy grows when it is aligned with momentum, when one acts not against the current but with it. The wise strategist looks for these moments, building up pressure and waiting for the instant when the smallest action unleashes the greatest effect. Momentum also applies to morale. A victorious army grows stronger with each success, its confidence carrying it forward. A defeated army grows weaker, its spirit broken by repeated loss. In life, we too experience momentum. Success breeds confidence and attracts opportunity. Failure, if left unaddressed, can spiral into discouragement. Sun Tzu's teaching reminds us to nurture positive momentum, to build step by step until strength gathers, and to guard against the downward slide of wasted energy. The lesson of energy is also one of harmony. Sun Tzu observes that an army must move as one body, its parts coordinated, its actions unified. Just as a skilled musician directs many instruments into a single symphony, a wise commander brings many people together into one force. Without coordination, energy is wasted in confusion. With harmony, even small numbers can achieve great things. This insight extends beyond the battlefield. In any organization, unity of effort multiplies energy, while division squanders it. In families, shared purpose strengthens bonds, while conflict drains strength. Within ourselves, alignment between our values, actions, and goals creates focus, while contradiction weakens us. Sun Tzu's principle of energy calls us to seek unity, both outwardly and inwardly, so that all our efforts move in one direction. He also speaks of the importance of adaptation in managing energy. Just as water takes the shape of its container, energy must be directed according to circumstance. There is no single way to use strength, no permanent strategy that always applies. A general who clings rigidly to one plan wastes energy by forcing it into the wrong shape. The wise leader observes, adjusts, and channels energy according to what the moment demands. This flexibility preserves strength and increases effectiveness. To see how this applies in life, imagine two people pursuing the same goal. One insists on a fixed path, refusing to adapt, exhausting themselves against obstacles. The other remains flexible, adjusting when needed, flowing around difficulties, conserving energy until the path clears. The second achieves more with less effort, not by working harder, but by working in harmony with circumstance. Sun Tzu teaches us that this adaptability is the key to using energy wisely. The image that lingers from this chapter is one of calm preparation and sudden release. The army waits, conserving strength, appearing still. Then, at the chosen moment, it moves with overwhelming force, catching the enemy unprepared. In the same way, our own efforts are most effective when we build patiently and act decisively. To rush constantly is to tire. To wait without acting is to stagnate. The art lies in the rhythm: conserve, prepare, release. As we reflect on these teachings, the deeper message becomes clear. Energy is not only about force but about wisdom. It is about knowing when to act and when to wait, when to conserve and when to release, when to spread and when to concentrate. It is about shaping conditions so that effort, when made, produces the greatest result. It is a teaching of balance, patience, and clarity. At the close of this chapter, Sun Tzu leaves us with a truth as timeless as it is simple. Victory does not always go to the strongest, but to the one who uses strength most wisely. The general who wastes nothing, who aligns his forces, who directs energy with precision, achieves more than the one who throws everything into reckless battle. The individual who conserves strength, focuses effort, and moves with timing achieves more than the one who struggles endlessly without direction. The journey now moves forward to his next lesson, where he explains how to recognize the weak points and the strong, how to exploit openings and guard against vulnerabilities. Having learned how to use energy, we are ready to see how it flows across the field of conflict, shaping opportunities and dangers alike. Part 7. Weak Points and Strong. When Sun Tzu asks us to study weak points and strong, he is asking us to see the world with both patience and an unflinching eye. He teaches that every situation, like every body or nation, carries places of firmness and places of fracture. The task of the strategist is to find the seams where pressure will open a way, and to fortify the places where a careless hand might force disaster. This is not a lesson of cruelty. It is a lesson of perception, the kind of attention that notices small differences and turns them into decisive advantage. Imagine a plain seen from a low hill. To the untrained eye, it is simply ground and grasses, a neutral sweep. To the eyes of a commander, it is a map of openings and traps, a ford where supply wagons might cross, a thicket that can hide an ambush, a ravine that will slow an enemy's march. These small features change the meaning of the whole landscape. So too in life, subtle details alter the shape of success. A competitor's overconfidence, a colleague's secret fatigue, a gap in a market. Each is a small thing with large consequence if noticed and used wisely. Sun Tzu warns us never to attack what is strong and defend against what is weak in a mindless way. The strategist studies not only his own resources, but the temperament and habits of his opponent. He looks for where the opponent is rigid and where he bends, where the opponent hides supply lines and where he leaves them exposed. An assault that hits a hardened flank will fail. An attack that finds a door left ajar will change everything. The art is to strike where the opponent least expects it and to avoid the places where their strength is concentrated. This teaching also insists on humility in judgment. A force that seems unremarkable may hide reserves and cunning. The strategist must not be seduced by appearances. An ostentatious show of strength may be empty. A quiet facade may conceal readiness. The wise leader cultivates steady observation rather than rushing to conclusions. The value of careful reconnaissance, of listening more than boasting, is a thread woven through Sun Tzu's words. Knowledge harvested patiently is more valuable than courage shown blindly. From another angle, the chapter urges us to change shape like water. Strength is not only about where you press, but how you present your pressure. If the enemy expects a direct assault, diversion will work. If they brace for noise, silence may unnerve them. Variability is the friend of a clever strategist. By shifting form, you make it harder for others to find and exploit your weak points. In this way, protection and offense become partners. By moving unpredictably, you hide where you are thin and reveal where you are strong. The lesson reaches into the realm of human relations as easily as it reaches battlefields. In arguments, people show strengths of conviction in certain subjects and blind spots in others. A negotiation pushed toward your opponent's strongholds will harden them. Maneuvered toward their delicate areas makes agreement possible. In managing teams, leaders who ignore the subtle weaknesses among their staff, the quiet discouragement, the mismatch of skills, the unseen burnout, risk collapse. Those who attend to these details and shift tasks gently can turn fragility into resilience. Sun Tzu also presents the tactical virtue of exploiting momentum in another form. He counsels the strategist to press where there is movement. A weak point is rarely a static place. It is where pressure has already begun to affect structure. An enemy who has stretched supply lines thin on a long road is showing strain. A market leader who has grown complacent is leaving a seam. The wise actor does not invent weakness out of thin air. He watches for strain already appearing and then applies pressure carefully until the tension splits. This is how small, continuous effort can yield decisive results. There is a moral dimension in this teaching too. Sun Tzu's focus on weak points should not be used as a license for cruelty or exploitation of the defenseless in unethical ways. Rather, it is a discipline of efficiency and responsibility. In governance, for example, a leader who notices social fractures must choose whether to exploit them for short-term advantage or to heal them for long-term stability. A strategist with conscience will tend towards solutions that strengthen the whole while weakening only the dangerous edges of opposition. The highest goal remains preservation, not wanton harm. Another thread in this chapter is the notion of timing connected to weakness and strength. To strike at an opening before it ripens is as foolish as waiting too long. The strategist must sense the moment when a weak point will become decisive if pressure is applied. This requires both courage and restraint. Courage to act when the chance appears, restraint to refrain until preparation matches the opportunity. In our lives, timing matters. A proposal made before the person is ready will be refused. The same idea presented after trust has grown may be embraced. Learning the rhythm of readiness is a vital skill. Sun Tzu also reminds us that weaknesses can be transformed. A place that is vulnerable today might be secured tomorrow. Supply lines can be rerouted. Morale can be restored. This is why speed matters. If you identify a seam and move too slowly, the opponent may close it. The strategist's advantage is not seeing weakness alone, but acting before the chance disappears. Here again we see the marriage of perception and action, not mere observation, but decisive movement tempered by judgment. On the other hand, he urges us to protect our own seams. Every house has doors and windows. The wise builder locks them at night, sets guards where needed, and arranges furniture to prevent accidents. Likewise, a person or organization must recognize where it is vulnerable and take measures that are simple but effective. Redundancy in critical areas, cross-training so knowledge is not held by one person alone, savings that cushion unexpected expense, and clear communication that prevents small misunderstandings from becoming crises. These practices do not require heroism, they require attention. The chapter further teaches that feigning vulnerability can be a strategy. By appearing weak in places where you are strong, you draw adversaries into traps they create for themselves. Conversely, posing strength where you are thin can deter attacks. But such deceptions must be used with caution. They are tricks of the strategist, not moral absolutes. Each must be weighted against the cost of being discovered. If the masquerade collapses, the consequences may be severe. Thus the art lies in subtlety and restraint, not in reckless theatrics. Applied to career and creativity, the teaching encourages us to seek niches rather than fight where everyone is strongest. A craftsman who competes in a crowded field of giants will struggle. A craftsman who finds a small corner, a seam in the market, and excels there will build a fortress of reputation. Many lasting successes begin not with head-on challenges to power, but by mastering overlooked spaces until the whole landscape changes. This principle honors craftsmanship, patient cultivation, and the strategic use of limited resources. Sun Tzu's language also carries the idea of layered defense. A city may have walls, but walls alone are not enough. The wise city has gates, patrols, reserves, and contingency plans. In the same way, a person can create multiple layers of protection, financial buffers, trusted allies, backup systems. Layering does not guarantee invincibility, but it raises the price of attack beyond what most opponents are willing to pay. Strength, then, is a matter of depth as much as of breadth. This chapter invites a final reflection on humility and curiosity. To perceive weak points, you must listen, watch, and learn. You must admit you do not already know everything. Pride blinds the eye. Curiosity sharpens it. The strategist who asks questions, who sends scouts, who accepts reports from the lowliest soldier, will gather mosaic pieces of truth that, when assembled, reveal a map of openings. The wise leader welcomes accurate information even when it is uncomfortable. Truth, after all, is the raw material of strategy. As this teaching closes, we carry forward its central paradox. Strength and weakness coexist in every situation, and the wise actor treats both as parts of a living pattern. To master this interplay is to gain advantage without arrogance, to act without cruelty, to win without unnecessary ruin. The practice of noticing seams, protecting one's own, and gently applying pressure where it will yield the greatest result is not only the strategy of war. It is the craft of living well amid complexity. In the next part of our journey, we will follow Sun Tzu into the world of maneuvering, how movement, coordination, and clever deployment allow even a small force to achieve large ends. Having learned to find seams and to guard them, we will now study how to move through the world in ways that keep our strengths alive and our weaknesses hidden until the moment of effect. Part 8. Maneuvering. Having shown us the importance of planning, of conserving strength, of winning without fighting, of patient positioning, and of recognizing weakness and strength, Sun Tzu turns now to the subject of movement. For him, maneuvering is not merely the act of marching troops across a field. It is the discipline of knowing when and how to move, how to maintain order while in motion, and how to avoid being trapped by one's own momentum. In this chapter, his voice grows sharper, for he warns us that while movement is necessary, it is also dangerous. An army in camp is stable, supplied, and secure. An army on the move grows vulnerable. Lines stretch, supply wagons lag, scouts wander far, and soldiers tire. Every mile marched is a mile farther from the safety of stores and walls. The general who orders movement without careful thought risks not only defeat but disintegration. To move too quickly may exhaust the men. To move too slowly may surrender initiative. To move without discipline may collapse the army into chaos. The art of maneuvering lies in striking the balance, swift enough to seize opportunity, measured enough to preserve order, disciplined enough to withstand pressure. This lesson extends naturally into our lives. When we decide to change jobs, to relocate, to begin a new project, or to shift direction, we are maneuvering. Stability is left behind, and with it comes both promise and risk. If we leap too quickly, without preparation, we may stumble. If we hesitate endlessly, the chance may vanish. If we rush without coordination, we may scatter our energy. The teaching invites us to remember that movement is not success by itself. It must be guided by clarity, supported by structure, and paced by wisdom. Sun Tzu stresses the importance of unity in motion. He reminds us that an army must move as a single body, with officers and soldiers aligned, each understanding their role. Disorder on the march invites ambush and collapse. In our own work and relationships, the same truth holds. A family that moves through a time of change without communication falters. A business that expands without aligning its teams creates confusion. A personal transition pursued without internal clarity, without one's values, priorities, and actions in agreement, leads to inner conflict. To maneuver well is to move in harmony. He also points to the psychological toll of movement. Soldiers on the march become restless, anxious, and uncertain. Fatigue dulls discipline. Fear spreads when order weakens. A wise commander recognizes these human limits and provides rest, encouragement, and structure to sustain morale. Leaders in every age must do the same. People in transition need stability and reassurance. Those around us require clarity of purpose when change unsettles them. Even within ourselves, when moving into the unknown, we must tend our own morale with patience and self-compassion. Another strand of this chapter lies in the clever use of terrain. Sun Tzu warns against marching blindly through dangerous ground or being lured into disadvantageous positions. He urges commanders to study the land, to move through places that favor them, and to avoid narrow paths, steep hills, or rivers that expose them to attack. Translated into modern life, this is the call to be mindful of context when we move. A career change pursued in the wrong market may fail despite skill. A personal risk taken in the wrong moment may bring more harm than growth. To maneuver wisely is to watch the ground beneath our feet as carefully as the horizon ahead. Maneuvering also demands flexibility. An army that moves rigidly becomes predictable, and predictability invites ambush. The wise general changes routes, varies speed, disguises intentions, and creates uncertainty in the minds of his opponents. In daily life, flexibility is just as crucial. If every decision we make is transparent to rivals, they will anticipate us. If every routine is unchanging, we lose adaptability. By varying pace, by disguising intention when necessary, by being willing to adjust our plans, we remain resilient and hard to trap. Yet Sun Tzu warns that deception alone is not enough. Maneuvering is costly. It consumes energy, strains resources, and wears down spirit. For this reason, he stresses the importance of preparation before movement. The commander must secure supplies, ensure discipline, and communicate clearly before the march begins. In our own terms, this is the lesson that change should not be undertaken lightly. A move to a new city, a shift to a new career, or a great project in life should be prepared for with savings, skills, and clarity. The journey is hard enough. To set out unprepared is to court disaster. One of the subtler lessons here is the value of patience during movement. The temptation in uncertain times is to rush, to force a resolution quickly. Yet Sun Tzu counsels steady pace, conserving energy for the decisive moment. The wise strategist knows that haste can scatter formations, drain strength, and invite mistakes. Similarly, in our lives, the rush to complete transitions often leaves us exhausted, our steps sloppy, our judgment clouded. To move carefully, even when impatient, preserves the strength needed when the true challenge appears. Sun Tzu also speaks of the dangers of communication in motion. Armies that lose contact with their units during maneuvers become fragmented and vulnerable. In modern life, miscommunication during times of change can be just as destructive. Families fall into misunderstanding when not speaking clearly. Organizations collapse under rumor when leaders fail to share vision. Individuals stumble when they lie to themselves about what they truly want. Maneuvering wisely requires honest communication that binds all parts together. At a deeper level, this chapter reminds us that maneuvering is not only external but internal. It is about moving our own minds, shifting habits, and directing thoughts. To steer ourselves through personal change is to practice maneuvering on the most intimate battlefield. To break old patterns, to redirect energy, to move toward clarity while resisting distractions, is as much an art as leading soldiers across uncertain ground. As the chapter draws to its close, we see that maneuvering is both art and danger. It is essential, for without movement no victory can be reached. But it is perilous, for motion exposes weakness, strains resources, and tests discipline. Sun Tzu does not tell us to avoid maneuvering, but to respect it, to prepare for it, to pace it, to guide it with harmony and wisdom. The lesson is timeless. Change is necessary, but careless change destroys. The wise path is steady, united, and aware. The journey now turns to variation in tactics, the lesson that movement and strategy cannot remain fixed but must shift continually. Having seen the risks of marching armies, Sun Tzu will show us how adaptability, creativity, and surprise form the heart of enduring success. Part 9. Variation in Tactics. After guiding us through the discipline of maneuvering, Sun Tzu now brings us to one of his most important warnings: the danger of rigidity. No plan, no formation, no tactic can remain fixed forever. Enemies learn, conditions shift, terrain changes, and opportunities rise and fall. The general who clings to a single method, however successful it may have been in the past, is already walking toward defeat. The art of strategy is not only to prepare and move, but to vary, to adapt, and to surprise. Sun Tzu reminds us that the battlefield is alive. It is not a stage upon which one rehearses a script, but a river in constant motion. To stand still is to sink. To repeat without variation is to invite anticipation. A commander who always attacks directly will be met with walls. A commander who always hides will eventually be cornered. The balance lies in change. By varying tactics, by shifting from open assault to quiet deception, from speed to patience, from strength to subtlety, the strategist keeps the enemy off balance. Uncertainty becomes a weapon in itself. The lesson is clear in our own time. People often fall into habits of thought and action, believing that what worked once will work always. A business that relies on the same model while the world evolves soon finds itself left behind. A leader who uses the same motivational tools without change loses the attention of their people. Even within ourselves, repeating the same responses to every challenge locks us into patterns that no longer serve us. Variation is not disorder but renewal. It breathes life into strategy and keeps us from becoming predictable. Sun Tzu is careful to explain that variation is not random motion. To vary without purpose is confusion, not strategy. He insists that change must be guided by principle and circumstance. A general must know when to advance and when to retreat, when to split forces and when to keep them united, when to appear strong and when to seem weak. These shifts are not accidents but deliberate responses to the flow of events. Like a skilled musician altering tempo and tone, the strategist varies tactics to suit the moment, not out of whim but out of wisdom. This teaching invites us to cultivate awareness. To vary effectively, one must be attentive to context. The wise strategist does not cling to yesterday's success but asks each day anew, what is needed now? What does this moment demand? By asking such questions, we prevent ourselves from repeating actions that no longer fit. We open the door to creative solutions that others, locked in routine, cannot see. Sun Tzu also warns that those who fail to vary invite not only defeat but also the erosion of morale. Soldiers who see their leaders acting predictably grow anxious, knowing the enemy will anticipate their moves. Workers who watch leaders repeat old mistakes lose faith. Friends and families that remain stuck in the same patterns of conflict grow weary. Variation refreshes spirit as much as it confuses opponents. It restores energy, keeping people engaged and hopeful. The chapter also carries a reminder about humility. To vary tactics is to admit that no single method is sufficient for every challenge. It is a recognition of human limitation, a confession that certainty is fragile and that wisdom lies in flexibility. Leaders who insist on one way alone, whether out of pride or fear, place themselves in chains. Leaders who adapt freely remain open, learning and growing with each change. Consider the lives of those who thrive across decades. They are rarely those who did one thing only, in one way, forever. They are those who reinvented themselves, who shifted when conditions changed, who saw that variation is the rhythm of survival. Nations endure when they reform, businesses thrive when they innovate, individuals grow when they embrace new skills and perspectives. Sun Tzu's words echo through these truths. Without variation, decline is certain. At the same time, variation must be used with care. Too much change without foundation leads to instability. If every tactic shifts daily without pattern, allies become confused and trust erodes. The art lies in balance, steady principles beneath, flexible actions above. Core values remain constant while tactics change. In this way, variation strengthens rather than destabilizes. Sun Tzu's imagery of water returns here with power. Water flows around rocks, shifts through channels, changes speed as the ground demands. Yet it remains water. Its essence is constant even as its form is endlessly varied. In the same way, a strategist must hold to guiding principles while altering the surface of action. Constancy and change together form resilience. In daily life, this can mean holding to integrity while altering method. A teacher who values learning may change style for each class while remaining committed to truth. A parent may vary discipline and encouragement according to each child while keeping love constant. A business may adapt marketing or design while holding to its mission. Variation without principle is chaos, but variation rooted in purpose is strength. Sun Tzu also points to the power of surprise. When an opponent cannot predict your next move, fear and hesitation grow. Surprise magnifies even small efforts into larger effects. In our own struggles, surprise can mean breaking patterns others expect of us, approaching challenges with creativity, and refusing to be confined by assumptions. The person who acts with fresh imagination often outpaces those who rely only on repetition. As we rest with this teaching, its simplicity masks its depth. To vary is to remain alive. To cling without change is to prepare for defeat. Strategy, like life itself, is a dance between constancy and motion, principle and adaptation. The wise path is not to freeze in habit but to flow with the times, shaping tactics to meet the shifting world. The journey now leads us further, into the study of armies on the march, where Sun Tzu shows how movement itself reveals truths about morale, strength, and intention. Having learned to vary our tactics, we will now learn to read variation in others, to see in the steps of an army the secrets of its heart. Part 10. Army on the March. When Sun Tzu speaks of an army on the march, he turns our attention to the details of movement, to the subtle signs that reveal the strength or weakness of those around us. He teaches that every motion, every sound, every change in the environment can be read like a language. To the untrained eye, soldiers marching across hills are only men in motion. To the strategist, their pace, their formations, their demeanor, and the very dust they raise tell stories about their condition. This chapter is not only about armies. It is about perception, about learning to read the world by its quiet signals. Sun Tzu tells us that the wise commander can discern much from observation. Dust rising in high, thick clouds suggests the advance of chariots or wagons. Thin and low dust suggests infantry. When the dust breaks into several trails, it may mean the force is divided. The speed of movement tells whether an army is tired or fresh. If soldiers lean on their spears, it shows hunger and fatigue. If they drink water before reaching it, it shows thirst. If they gather to cook while the enemy is near, it shows lack of discipline. These details seem small, but they form a map of truth. The lesson here is not merely about armies but about life. People, too, reveal themselves through signs. Fatigue shows in posture, worry in tone, excitement in pace. Organizations reveal their health through the way workers act, how swiftly they respond, how carefully they prepare. Nations show strength or weakness through the rhythm of their movements, their openness or secrecy, their confidence or hesitation. To read these signs is to see beneath appearances, to grasp the reality behind the mask. Sun Tzu also warns us to study not only the enemy but ourselves. Just as we observe others' movements, we must reflect on our own. What do our actions reveal? Do they show discipline and readiness, or confusion and fatigue? Are we moving with clarity, or stumbling without direction? The ability to read ourselves with honesty is as vital as the ability to read others. Without this balance, we risk blindness. He extends this teaching to terrain and environment. The cries of birds may signal ambushes. The sudden silence of animals may reveal the presence of soldiers. Fires on distant hills may be signals. Scattered dust may mean foraging, and orderly movement may show confidence. The strategist pays attention to what others ignore, seeing in nature and in small disturbances the outlines of unseen plans. This way of seeing is as relevant now as it was then. Markets give signals of change long before the crash arrives. Relationships show signs of strain long before they break. Health whispers its warnings long before it fails. Those who listen and observe can act before crisis strikes. Sun Tzu reminds us that an army's morale is revealed by its manner. When troops speak in low tones, they are united. When they whisper or glance frequently behind them, they are uncertain. When banners and flags are steady, discipline is strong. When they waver, order is collapsing. Morale, he teaches, is not invisible. It is written in movement, posture, and sound. To ignore these signs is to march blind into danger. To observe them is to hold the advantage of foresight. Another lesson in this chapter is the importance of caution. An enemy who advances boldly may be strong, or he may be baiting a trap. An enemy who retreats may be weak, or he may be luring you into pursuit. Appearances deceive, but careful observation over time reveals patterns. The wise commander does not rush to judgment but tests, probes, and confirms. He combines observation with patience to see whether the signs speak truth. In modern life, this is a lesson about interpretation. Not every smile means contentment. Not every silence means agreement. Not every display of strength means true power. To judge too quickly is to risk falling into illusion. The art is to observe, compare, and reflect before acting. Just as a hunter waits for the rustle of branches to confirm what lies ahead, so too must we test our impressions with care. Sun Tzu also warns against being deceived by the enemy's signals. Just as we can read truth from movement, so can others plant false signs to mislead us. Fires may be lit to suggest large numbers. Dust may be stirred by small groups to appear as armies. Soldiers may act tired to invite attack. The wise commander balances trust in signs with the awareness that some are feigned. He teaches us to remain skeptical, to question whether what we see is reality or theater. There is a profound modern lesson here. We live in a world saturated with signals, from news headlines to social media posts, from economic indicators to daily conversations. Some are true, many are staged. The skill of discernment, separating the real from the false, has never been more necessary. Sun Tzu's wisdom reminds us not to accept appearances at face value, but to seek the patterns that reveal deeper truth. The teaching also speaks of discipline during movement. An army that marches in silence, whose banners are firm, whose soldiers rest in turns rather than in confusion, shows strength. A group that marches noisily, breaks formation, or acts erratically shows weakness. The same applies to our lives. Discipline in how we move through change reveals resilience. Disorder reveals fragility. The quiet rhythm of steady progress is more powerful than the noisy rush of uncoordinated effort. As we reflect on this chapter, we see how much Sun Tzu values perception. He does not teach us to rely only on force or numbers. He teaches us to see, to listen, to interpret. Victory belongs not only to the strong, but to those who read the world with care. The smallest signs, when understood, can decide the largest outcomes. At the close of this teaching, Sun Tzu points us toward the greater truth. The world is full of signals, and those who attend to them move with wisdom. To ignore them is to stumble blind. To observe, to question, and to learn is to walk with foresight. The journey continues in the next part, where he turns to the study of terrain itself, showing how the very shape of the earth guides destiny, and how the wise strategist uses ground not only as setting but as weapon. Part 11. Terrain. When Sun Tzu turns to the subject of terrain, his words remind us that ground itself is more than earth beneath our feet. It is both opportunity and danger, shaping the choices of armies and the fate of those who lead them. Terrain is not passive. It influences every movement, every tactic, every hope of victory. To ignore it is to fight blind. To understand it is to command advantage before a single arrow is loosed. He describes many kinds of ground. There is accessible ground, open to both sides, where neither can claim advantage. There is entangling ground, where retreat is difficult and battles linger dangerously. There is temporizing ground, where neither side benefits from advancing. There is narrow ground, where only small numbers can fight at once. There is steep or high ground, where those above dominate those below. There is distant ground, where fatigue threatens long before the enemy is reached. Each type carries lessons, not only for battlefields but for the landscapes of life itself. Accessible ground teaches us the danger of complacency. When both sides hold equal footing, the careless leader believes there is no threat. Yet here discipline and preparation decide outcomes. In our own lives, the everyday routines we share with others seem harmless, but it is in ordinary settings, workplaces, families, friendships, that discipline in small things creates great advantage. The one who prepares even when the ground seems even will prevail when difficulty comes. Entangling ground warns us against commitments we cannot easily escape. To march deep into hostile land without supply lines secure is to risk ruin. To enter disputes or agreements without a path of retreat is to entangle ourselves. In modern life, this can be seen in financial debts, unhealthy relationships, or ill-considered ventures that trap us. Sun Tzu's wisdom calls us to consider carefully before advancing where withdrawal would be costly. Better to pause than to bind ourselves where freedom is lost. Temporizing ground teaches patience. When neither side can gain by advancing, waiting is often the best choice. Sun Tzu reminds us that not all movement is progress. Sometimes the wise path is to hold position, conserve strength, and watch until conditions change. This is true in negotiations that stall, in personal goals that lack clarity, in projects where the timing is not yet ripe. To act for the sake of action only wastes energy. To wait with readiness preserves it. Narrow ground shows the power of concentration. When space permits only a few to fight, numbers matter less than positioning. To hold a pass with a small force can equalize against a larger enemy. In life, this reflects the importance of focusing effort. A lone voice in the right forum may shape opinion more than a crowd shouting in chaos. A small business dominating a narrow niche may withstand giants. Strength is magnified when concentrated where it matters most. High ground has long been known as advantage. To stand above your opponent is to see further, to strike with ease, and to defend with strength. Sun Tzu tells us to seize such ground first and hold it firmly. Translated to our world, this is the principle of perspective. Those who gain higher knowledge, broader vision, or clearer awareness naturally command advantage. Education, foresight, and wisdom lift us to vantage points from which we can act with clarity while others stumble in the valleys below. Distant ground carries the lesson of endurance. To fight after a long march is to meet the enemy already weary. Sun Tzu warns against exhausting soldiers before the decisive moment. In our lives, this truth is seen whenever we waste our energy in preparation that leaves nothing for the event itself. Overwork before opportunity, endless practice without rest, anxiety that drains us before the challenge arrives. These are forms of distant ground. The wise conserve energy, ensuring they reach the critical moment strong rather than spent. Beyond these categories, Sun Tzu reminds us that terrain is never neutral. It must be read, respected, and used. A clever general uses the land as ally, rivers as barriers, forests as cover, mountains as shields. A careless general treats the land as backdrop, and so suffers. This wisdom calls us to notice the environments in which we act. Markets, cultures, families, and even moods are kinds of terrain. Each shapes what is possible. To ignore them is folly. To adapt to them is wisdom. This teaching also emphasizes flexibility. Ground that benefits today may harm tomorrow. The path that offers advantage may become a trap if held too long. The valley that provides shelter may flood. Life too demands such awareness. The path that helps us at one stage may hinder us at another. The role, the habit, the belief that once protected us may later entangle us. To move with awareness of shifting terrain is to remain alive to change. Sun Tzu's reflections on terrain also highlight the inseparability of external and internal landscapes. A commander who fails to read the ground outside is blind. But one who fails to read the ground within, the terrain of his soldiers' hearts, is equally lost. Terrain is not only physical, it is emotional, psychological, and cultural. Leaders who understand both kinds of ground can move with confidence. Leaders who neglect either risk collapse. The deeper lesson is humility. Terrain cannot be commanded. It must be respected. Rivers flow as they will. Mountains stand where they always have. Seasons turn with indifference to human ambition. The wise strategist does not demand the world change to suit him. He changes himself to suit the world. This humility is not weakness but strength, for it aligns us with reality. When we flow with the shape of the earth, our strength is multiplied. When we fight against it, we waste ourselves. As we reflect on these teachings, we see that terrain is both literal and metaphorical. It is the ground beneath armies, the markets around businesses, the moods within relationships, the circumstances that frame every choice. To see it clearly, to respect its power, and to act in harmony with it is to walk with wisdom. To ignore it is to stumble, however strong we may seem. At the close of this chapter, we carry forward a truth. The ground we stand upon shapes us, whether we notice it or not. Those who understand it shape their destiny. Those who ignore it surrender to chance. The journey now continues into one of Sun Tzu's most complex lessons. The 9 situations, 9 kinds of ground into which armies may fall, each demanding different responses. Here he deepens his teaching, showing how the patterns of struggle evolve as conflict unfolds, and how wisdom lies in adapting not only to terrain but to circumstance itself. Part 12. The 9 Situations. Sun Tzu now leads us into one of his most detailed reflections, the study of the 9 situations, 9 forms of ground or circumstance into which armies may fall. With this chapter his teaching grows more complex, for he shows that conflict is not one single condition but a shifting sequence of stages. Each type of ground requires a different response, and the general who fails to adjust will stumble. The 9 situations are not only about armies and land. They are about the phases of struggle itself, the turning points that shape the path of every great endeavor. He begins with dispersive ground. This is the ground near home, where soldiers still feel tied to their families and villages. On such ground their thoughts are divided, their loyalty distracted. They are not ready for deep commitment. The lesson here is about beginnings. At the start of any effort, when commitment is still shallow, energy scatters easily. To move forward, a leader must bind people together with clear purpose, drawing their hearts fully into the task. In our lives, dispersive ground appears whenever we begin a project without full commitment, when our attention wavers between old habits and new directions. Only when we let go of retreat can we move forward with strength. The second is facile ground, open and easy to move through. Here both armies can advance or retreat without difficulty. It offers no particular advantage. In such conditions, caution is needed, for complacency breeds vulnerability. When the environment seems safe, people relax their guard. In life, facile ground is the time when things feel easy, when jobs are stable, when health is good, when relationships flow without conflict. Yet it is precisely then that discipline matters most. To prepare in ease is to ensure survival in hardship. The third is contentious ground, places that hold strategic value, such as mountain passes or river crossings. Whoever holds them gains power, but they are difficult to seize. Here Sun Tzu counsels swift action. Delay means loss, for the opponent may claim the ground first. In life, contentious ground is the opportunity that cannot wait, the chance to speak, the moment to act, the door that opens briefly. To hesitate is to watch it close. The wise learn to recognize such moments and step forward decisively. The fourth is open ground, where movement is free and neither side can easily defend. In such spaces, Sun Tzu advises leaders to keep forces united and watchful, for the danger lies not in terrain but in the suddenness of attack. Open ground mirrors times in our lives when options seem limitless, when no obstacle restrains us. Yet too many options can be a trap, scattering energy. The lesson is to stay focused even when nothing blocks the way, to avoid losing direction in abundance. The fifth is ground of intersecting highways, places where many roads meet and several powers may converge. These areas carry both opportunity and danger, for alliances may be formed or broken quickly. Sun Tzu reminds us that diplomacy, not only force, decides outcomes here. In modern terms, this is the arena of networks, where partnerships, relationships, and collaborations overlap. The wise leader builds alliances, for no single power can dominate crossroads alone. The foolish one seeks to stand alone and is overwhelmed. The sixth is serious ground, where advancing brings great benefit but retreat threatens loss. Here the army is committed, yet the risk is high. Sun Tzu teaches that in such conditions, discipline and unity are essential. Soldiers must be reminded of purpose, for hesitation can break them. In our lives, serious ground arises when we pursue goals that carry both promise and peril, investing in a venture, committing to a relationship, choosing a path that cannot be abandoned without consequence. In these times, clarity of purpose holds us firm. The seventh is difficult ground, harsh terrain where movement is slow and danger constant. Here, Sun Tzu counsels avoidance when possible. If one must pass through, caution and preparation are vital. In life, difficult ground is the period of trial, sickness, poverty, loss, or crisis. These seasons cannot always be avoided, but they can be endured with patience, discipline, and support. The teaching here is resilience, the ability to keep moving even when each step feels heavy. The eighth is hemmed-in ground, where retreat is blocked and survival demands ingenuity. To remain still here is to perish. Sun Tzu instructs that leaders must use creativity, devising unexpected paths of escape or striking boldly to carve a way out. In modern life, hemmed-in ground appears in situations where options seem gone: financial ruin, broken relationships, overwhelming challenges. Here, conventional thinking fails. Innovation, courage, and daring are required to break free. The ninth and final is desperate ground, where soldiers know that only fighting can save them. With no escape, they stand firm and give everything. Sun Tzu observes that men placed in desperate ground find courage beyond expectation, for survival itself depends on victory. This is the paradox of human nature. When all retreat is cut off, when nothing remains but to fight, people discover depths of strength they did not know they had. In our own lives, desperate ground comes rarely but powerfully. It is the moment when everything is at stake, when hesitation means loss, when we must rise fully or fall completely. These moments, though terrifying, reveal the strength within us. Through these 9 situations, Sun Tzu shows us that no ground is the same, no circumstance static. Each demands a different response. To treat all alike is folly. The wisdom is to discern where we stand and to act accordingly. Are we on dispersive ground, needing unity? On contentious ground, needing speed? On desperate ground, needing total courage? The strategist's art lies in recognition and response. The deeper lesson is that life itself unfolds across shifting grounds. We pass through ease and hardship, through opportunities that demand speed and moments that demand patience, through places where retreat is easy and places where retreat is impossible. Wisdom is not in clinging to one response, but in adjusting to each situation with clarity. As this teaching closes, we see how Sun Tzu has led us step by step into deeper reflection. Terrain shapes us, but circumstances within terrain shape us even more. The general who knows the 9 situations and adapts accordingly cannot be surprised. The person who understands the phases of their own life and adjusts with honesty cannot be broken. The journey now moves toward his lesson on spies and intelligence, where he reveals that knowledge, even more than strength, determines survival. Having studied grounds and situations, we will next study the hidden streams of information that flow beneath every struggle. Part 13. Use of Spies. After guiding us through plans, costs, positions, movements, and situations, Sun Tzu arrives at his final lesson, and here his words become sharper, more secretive. He tells us plainly that no undertaking in war is more important than the use of spies. Knowledge, he insists, is the foundation of victory. Battles are won not by numbers alone, nor by bravery alone, but by knowing what others do not know. To act without intelligence is to stumble in the dark. To act with it is to move with light while the enemy gropes blindly. He speaks of 5 kinds of spies. There are local spies, drawn from the inhabitants of enemy lands. There are inward spies, people placed within the enemy's own ranks. There are converted spies, those turned from enemy service to one's own side. There are doomed spies, sent to spread false information even at the cost of their lives. And there are surviving spies, who bring back accurate reports of the enemy's plans. Together, these 5 form a system of intelligence that allows a general to pierce the veil of secrecy and to see the battlefield as it truly is. To Sun Tzu, the value of spies lies not only in what they reveal but in how they shape perception. A single report may prevent an army from marching into ambush. A whisper in the right ear may dissolve alliances before they harden. A false rumor spread among enemies may lead them into mistakes that cost them dearly. Through intelligence, the strategist shapes outcomes without fighting, guiding events from the shadows. This teaching may sound distant from our lives, but its essence is as relevant as ever. Spies, in Sun Tzu's words, represent information. In every endeavor, information is the hidden current that determines success or failure. Businesses study markets to know where to invest. Doctors rely on diagnosis before treatment. Families thrive when communication is clear. Individuals grow when they know themselves honestly. Without knowledge, effort wastes itself. With knowledge, even small effort achieves much. There is also a moral depth to this chapter. Sun Tzu does not glorify deception for its own sake. He warns that secrecy and information must serve a higher goal: the preservation of the state, the avoidance of unnecessary war, the saving of lives. The true strategist seeks intelligence not to indulge suspicion or cruelty, but to shorten conflict and secure peace. Knowledge is not a toy. It is a responsibility. His words also remind us of the cost of ignorance. He says that to remain ignorant of the enemy's condition and yet act is to invite disaster. How often in our lives do we act without knowledge? We judge others without understanding their story. We leap into ventures without studying the risks. We argue without hearing the other side. These are forms of blindness. Sun Tzu invites us to pause, to gather truth, to seek clarity before action. He also reminds us that the most important intelligence often comes quietly. Spies do not trumpet their work, they whisper. In the same way, truth in our lives often arrives softly. It comes in the quiet detail others overlook, in the subtle feeling we ignore, in the patient observation that reveals more than loud declarations. Wisdom lies in listening to whispers rather than waiting for shouts. There is a broader lesson here about humility. To use spies is to admit that one does not know enough. It is to confess that others hold knowledge we lack, and that we must seek it. Leaders who believe they already know everything march blindly into ruin. Leaders who listen, who gather reports, who welcome uncomfortable truths, move with foresight. In our own lives, humility opens the door to learning. Pride shuts it. Sun Tzu's emphasis on spies also connects to his earlier teaching on deception. Just as we must conceal our own weakness and project strength, so too must we pierce the illusions of others. This balance of concealment and revelation shapes strategy. We must both guard our secrets and uncover those of others. In modern life, this means protecting our plans from unnecessary exposure while also learning enough about our environment to adapt wisely. The lesson extends into self-knowledge as well. In a sense, we must all become spies upon ourselves, observing our thoughts, habits, and motives with honesty. Without this internal intelligence, we deceive ourselves more deeply than any enemy could. To spy upon oneself is to seek the truth of who we are, to uncover weaknesses we prefer to ignore, and to strengthen what is fragile before it fails. At the close of this teaching, Sun Tzu reminds us that intelligence is the lifeblood of strategy. Without it, victory is impossible. With it, even the smallest force may prevail. His voice echoes across centuries to tell us that knowledge is not luxury but necessity, not ornament but foundation. With this final lesson, his work reaches its end. Yet the art of war is not a book of endings but of beginnings. Its wisdom does not rest in ancient battlefields but in the choices we face each day. When to move, when to wait, when to fight, when to yield, when to seek, when to listen. The general who masters these teachings may save kingdoms. The person who applies them with care may shape a life of clarity and resilience. The journey of Sun Tzu's words does not stop here. For though he has spoken of spies, terrain, energy, and plans, his deeper message is one of awareness. To be aware of ourselves, of others, of the world around us. This is the true art. The battles we face may differ from those of ancient China, but the wisdom remains. Victory belongs not to those who rush, nor to those who force, but to those who see clearly, act wisely, and preserve strength. Part 14. The Philosophy of Victory. As Sun Tzu's work nears its close, his teachings rise from the ground of tactics and battlefields into something broader, almost philosophical. He has shown us how to plan, how to move, how to use terrain, how to read signs, and how to gather knowledge. Yet behind all of these details lies a deeper question. What is victory? Is it the destruction of enemies, the claiming of territory, the lifting of banners over conquered walls? Or is it something quieter, something more enduring, something less visible but more profound? Sun Tzu insists that true victory is measured not by conquest alone but by preservation. The highest skill, he repeats, is to subdue without fighting, to achieve goals without ruin. Victory is not a matter of crushing others beneath us but of shaping conditions so that conflict dissolves before it begins. The strongest general is not the one who fills fields with corpses but the one who ends war swiftly, saving lives, resources, and stability. His vision of victory is almost paradoxical. The more skillful the strategist, the less dramatic his triumph appears, for the enemy collapses quietly without spectacle. This philosophy reminds us that the purpose of strategy is not glory but survival, not domination but harmony. Armies exist to protect states, not to destroy them in endless campaigns. Leaders exist to preserve the well-being of their people, not to indulge their own ambitions. In the same way, our personal struggles should aim not at empty triumphs that leave us hollow but at outcomes that preserve peace, dignity, and strength. Victory is not winning the loudest argument but sustaining the relationship. It is not exhausting ourselves to achieve one short-lived success but acting in ways that strengthen us for the long road ahead. Sun Tzu's philosophy of victory also emphasizes timing. He teaches that battles are won not simply by force but by striking at the right moment, when the enemy is weak, when the ground is favorable, when momentum flows. Victory is a rhythm, a harmony between preparation and opportunity. To act too early is to waste strength, to act too late is to miss the opening. The wise cultivate patience so that when the moment arrives, their strike is natural, decisive, and final. This philosophy speaks as much to life as to war. Success in our endeavors rarely comes from frantic effort alone. It comes from readiness meeting opportunity, from years of discipline suddenly converging with the right chance. The musician who trains daily seems to find fortune in one audition, but in truth that victory was shaped long before. The athlete who wins in a single moment of glory has been preparing quietly for years. Victory, in Sun Tzu's sense, is the visible flower of roots that have grown unseen beneath the ground. There is also in his words a profound respect for restraint. He warns repeatedly that the general who delights in battle for its own sake will ruin his state. The leader who fights for pride, who pursues glory at all costs, may win temporary triumphs but will sow long-term ruin. True victory comes with awareness of cost, with discipline in pursuit, with compassion in leadership. He calls us to remember that strength without restraint is destruction, and that the greatest victories are those that leave us stronger, not merely triumphant. At the heart of this philosophy is the idea of alignment. Sun Tzu began his book with the moral law, the harmony between ruler and people. That same harmony underlies his vision of victory. When leaders, soldiers, and citizens share purpose, victory is not forced but flows naturally. In our own lives, alignment of values and actions brings the same effect. When our choices align with our principles, success feels whole. When we betray our principles for short-term gains, any victory becomes hollow. Sun Tzu also asks us to consider the unseen dimensions of victory. It is not only about what happens on the battlefield, but about what happens afterward. A general may defeat an enemy but leave hatred so deep that endless wars follow. Another may resolve conflict in ways that plant seeds of peace. Which is the greater victory? The answer, Sun Tzu suggests, lies in endurance. Victories that last are greater than those that fade quickly. The same is true for us. Achievements that strengthen us for years are greater than fleeting wins that leave us empty. This chapter carries a quiet humility. Sun Tzu never pretends that victory is total or permanent. Every triumph is temporary, every advantage subject to change. He reminds us that wisdom lies in awareness of impermanence. We cannot cling to victory as though it will last forever, but we can use it to prepare for what comes next. The philosophy of victory, then, is not about clinging to triumphs but about building strength through them, carrying lessons forward, and remaining adaptable even in success. The essence of his teaching is this: victory belongs to those who see clearly, to those who prepare patiently, strike wisely, and act with restraint, to those who understand cost as well as reward, who seek preservation as well as conquest, who align means with ends. Victory, for Sun Tzu, is not a single moment of triumph but a way of living, a constant practice of clarity, balance, and discipline. As we pause here, we see how far his journey has carried us. What began as a manual of war has unfolded into a philosophy of life. His words have guided us from the dust of battlefields into the silence of reflection, showing that strategy is not only about defeating others but about mastering ourselves. The next and final chapter of this journey will turn outward again, looking at how the wisdom of the art of war has echoed through centuries, shaping generals, leaders, thinkers, and ordinary people across the world. There we will reflect on the legacy of Sun Tzu's teaching, and why his words remain alive even after 2.5 millennia. Part 15. The Art of War Today. When we arrive at the final step of Sun Tzu's journey, we find ourselves no longer on the battlefields of ancient China but in our own world, surrounded by struggles that look different yet are born of the same human nature. 2.5 millennia have passed since these teachings were first spoken, and still they guide leaders, thinkers, and ordinary people who seek clarity in times of conflict. The endurance of the art of war itself is proof of its wisdom, for no book survives so long unless it speaks to something timeless in the human condition. Generals across centuries have studied Sun Tzu's words. Napoleon carried his lessons on deception and maneuvering. Leaders of the Second World War, from Eisenhower to Yamamoto, looked to his teachings on planning and terrain. More recently, military academies in nearly every country still teach his principles, not because his world of chariots and spears remains, but because his observations on discipline, morale, perception, and timing apply to every kind of conflict. A commander may now direct drones and satellites instead of horsemen, but he still faces the same challenges of reading the enemy, conserving energy, and avoiding costly wars. Yet Sun Tzu's influence has spread far beyond the military. In boardrooms, executives quote his maxim that all warfare is based on deception. Companies prepare their strategies with his principle of laying plans, knowing themselves and their rivals before acting. Negotiators draw from his teaching that the highest victory is to win without fighting, crafting agreements that dissolve resistance instead of provoking it. Athletes and coaches study his lessons on momentum, discipline, and variation, shaping tactics that turn weakness into strength. Even in personal life, people carry his wisdom, choosing battles carefully, conserving energy, and remembering that victory is often found in patience, not in haste. What explains this reach across so many fields? It is that Sun Tzu did not write only about war. He wrote about conflict itself, and conflict is part of every human life. We all face struggles, against rivals, against circumstance, against ourselves. His words give us a language for these struggles, a way to see them not as chaos but as patterns that can be understood. He shows us that even when life feels uncertain, there are principles we can hold to: clarity of preparation, discipline of action, humility in victory, and wisdom in restraint. This relevance grows even sharper in the modern age, when information travels faster than armies ever marched, when reputations rise and fall in moments, when resources are spent quickly and renewal is often uncertain. In such a world, Sun Tzu's insistence on intelligence before action feels prophetic. We are flooded with signals, yet the ability to discern truth remains rare. His reminder to seek knowledge carefully, to question appearances, to study both ourselves and others, is more vital now than it has ever been. The art of war today is not only the art of armies and states. It is the art of navigating competition without being consumed by it. It is the art of standing firm without wasting strength, of adapting to change without losing identity, of preserving peace where possible and ending conflict swiftly when it cannot be avoided. It is about remembering that the strongest victories are those that leave us able to face tomorrow, not those that drain us for the sake of pride. Sun Tzu's legacy also carries a warning. He teaches us that leaders who neglect planning, who chase glory, who waste resources in endless struggle, bring ruin upon themselves and their people. We see this truth in history, but also in the present, in leaders who fight for ego rather than for the good of their people, in companies that collapse from reckless expansion, in individuals who exhaust themselves in battles they never needed to fight. His voice calls across the centuries, urging restraint, clarity, and the humility to know when not to fight. Yet within that warning lies hope. For if ruin comes from ignorance and pride, then peace and strength come from awareness and discipline. We are not condemned to repeat the mistakes of the past. We can choose to prepare wisely, to adapt flexibly, to resolve conflicts without needless harm. In this way, the philosophy of the art of war becomes not a relic of an ancient time but a living guide for how to walk through life with strength and grace. As this journey closes, we can reflect on the path we have walked. We began with the story of Sun Tzu, the shadowed figure whose life remains half legend yet whose words shine with clarity. We studied his teachings on plans, costs, deception, positions, energy, and perception. We learned the lessons of terrain, of situations, of spies, of restraint, and of the meaning of victory itself. Each chapter built upon the last, forming a vision not only of war but of wisdom, not only of conflict but of life. The final truth that remains is simple: victory belongs not to the strongest nor to the loudest, but to those who see clearly, act wisely, and preserve strength. The general who ends war swiftly, the leader who governs with restraint, the individual who chooses battles carefully, these are the true masters of the art. The world may change, weapons may evolve, cultures may shift, but human nature endures. Ambition, fear, pride, and hope still shape our struggles. And so long as they do, the quiet voice of Sun Tzu will remain relevant, reminding us that the art of war is in truth the art of awareness, the art of balance, the art of living with clarity amid conflict. And so we close this long journey. The scrolls of the art of war may be ancient, but their wisdom is evergreen. Each reader, each generation, finds in them what they need: a reminder to prepare, a call to patience, a guide to perception, a warning against pride. These lessons, gathered from the dust of ancient battlefields, now walk with us into boardrooms, negotiations, homes, and hearts. Victory is no longer measured in captured cities, but in preserved lives, in resolved disputes, in strength held quietly for the days to come. This is Sun Tzu's gift, not a manual of destruction, but a path to wisdom. Not the glorification of war, but the art of ending it well. And in that gift lies the reason his words endure, whispering to us even now, across centuries of change, that the truest victory is not conquest but clarity, not ruin but preservation, not force but understanding. And so we reach the end of our journey through the art of war. From the quiet planning before battle, to the wisdom of restraint, to the final reflection on what victory truly means. Sun Tzu's words continue to echo across centuries, guiding us not only in war but in life itself. If you enjoyed this story, I'd love for you to support the channel. Please remember to like this video, subscribe if you haven't yet, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts, or tell us where in the world you listen from. It's always inspiring to see this community grow across so many places. For now, let your mind rest in the calm that follows. Carry Sun Tzu's wisdom with you, not as noise or burden, but as quiet clarity for the days ahead. Thank you for listening, and until next time, may peace and wisdom walk with you.